Welcome to the Equipping Leaders Podcast Leader Study Series. I'm Natasha, a leader development professional and overall leadership enthusiast.
And I'm Corey, a program manager and an emerging people leader, thus a leadership enthusiast.
We are doing a leader study of the TV show Z Nation, deconstructing the leaders, decisions, and team dynamics of the characters on the show to look at how leadership is all around us. And even if we're not in a position of leadership, we can still demonstrate it in our actions, responses, and opportunities.
Z Nation aired from 2014 to 2018, but if you haven't seen it yet, there will be spoilers in these episodes. Today, we're talking about Season 5, specifically stepping back and supporting other leaders, change management, and the future impact of mentorship relationships. Let's jump in.
So now we're up to episode 5 in season 5, and there have been more of these bombings in Pacifica. And so just the level of the citizens and of everyone, the stress level is just getting pretty high. And what I think is so interesting about here moving forward is it's how do leaders create calm amongst the chaos, and how do they get people back on the side of reasonability and rationality when people are in a constant fight or flight mode. And I think that's like one of the amazing challenges that they start to work with here, and that we see different characters actually start to have a hand in. So I'll pass it over to you though. What were some of your takeaways from season 5, episode 5, Killing All the Books?
So I think that we're starting to see George, she, like you said, right, they're dealing with these changes. She's starting to lose some friends along the way. There's more challenges, and I think she's still remaining focused on that mission. And I think that's a key thing of she's not letting these, they're internal to the team, but she's not letting them affect the mission.
Yeah. I think there's such a way that, and I've seen it rarely, I've probably seen 2 people ever be that good at this, maybe 3, where all the stuff is going on, but they are still able to draw you in, create that calm, make you feel comfortable and safe for whatever comes next, even though they give you no guarantees. I think that's another thing, is that the best leaders that I've seen, even in the worst situations, they never give you a guarantee. And I think that there's something about being able to not give a guarantee, but make people still feel bought in, that is really a skill. And not only a skill that you can learn, but it's also a skill that comes from genuine care, right? That kind of like we talked about, that understanding the why, but also I really care about these people. And you can do both of those things, right? We want to move a mission forward. We want to ship a product. We want to do all these different things. And I care deeply about these people.
Yeah, that's such a great point, because I think when you lose sight of that, and you start to lose that buy-in, and that's where you start to run into a lot of those issues as well. So I think that's a really great point. I think something else that really started to stick out to me too was the goal is getting more complex, right? Or to get to the goal is getting more complex now too. And so you have to navigate through that, and that is, creating more difficulties as well. So, and I think George does a really great job of handling that, of like kind of still keeping the main thread. Warren is also, I think, we haven't talked about it a lot yet, but Warren's also taking a back seat, right? Normally she's the one calling the shots and doing everything, and now she's done a really great job of going from leader into that effective follower, advisor, coach sort of role with George. And I think that George does a great job of, she knows what she wants. Warren's aware of that. She checks in with Warren though. One, for her opinion, right? She values her input, her leadership, etc. But then I think Warren also does a great job of saying, it's your call, right? These are the things that I think, or you said this thing, I'm going to go with it. These are things that we need to be aware of. And I think that that's something that a lot of people often struggle with. You know what I mean? They can't step back from that role.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people also view their professional life, it has to be linear and it always has to be up. And if it's not that, then they'll fight to keep it in that. But like somebody like John Maxwell, he has been in great positions and then he's left those companies and started in much lower quote unquote positions because that was what he wanted at the time. That was where he wanted to build. That was how he wanted to do different things. But if he had just thought, it has to be linear. I always have to be making more. I always have to be in charge of more people. And I have to have the most clout of all these things. He definitely wouldn't be where he is right now. And most of the best leaders that we know of probably wouldn't. So yeah, I think there's something really impactful about, I don't have to be the one in charge all the time. It doesn't mean that I quit. I still am here because, again, I believe in this mission. I believe in this team. How can I help? Like, how can I help? Is being the leader the most helpful thing for me right now and the most helpful thing to you? Then I'll do that. But if it's not, then it's not. And it also goes back to what we were talking about a little bit in the previous episode with the professor and George, where it's like Warren acknowledges the leadership and the influence and all of that that George has built and that George has. And so being able to be like, you've got this, it doesn't always have to be me. Not every opportunity is my opportunity. This could be yours.
Yeah, you know, this is a great point. And when you're talking about like, do I need to be the leader? Is that the thing I need to be right now for the group, right? I think same side of the coin. You have 10K who lost his hand, right? And he's sort of said without saying he was not going to be an asset to the group right now, right? It wasn't that he was leaving. It was that I have a new challenge. I need to figure this out. So he stepped away from it for a little bit. He's like, I need to reassess. I need to learn this thing, and then I'll be back to contribute again, right? But I'm not going to help you. I'm going to hinder you. I got other stuff on my mind. And I think that that's a maturity that a lot of people don't, a lot of leaders and stuff don't have too, is sometimes maybe you got a lot going on in your personal life or whatever. You're struggling to divide that. And that's the time where I think you can go to your leaders and say, hey, these are things that I have going on. They're important to me. They're sort of affecting my work. Is there somebody else that can step up for a little while, right? Can we come up with a plan on how to adjust and figure this out? And I think that takes a lot of maturity. But I also think you need a very uh, you need a psychologically safe work environment to be able to do that. And I don't know that everyone always has that, you know? Because be like, oh, you can't do what we need you to do anymore. Yeah, thanks. You can move on now. So losing that value. So I think that that's a interesting thing too.
Well, and I think that like we've seen recently a really great demonstration of that with the New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern when she stepped down and she was like, I just don't have enough in the tank. And so it was that acknowledgement that it's like what you need, I can't do. And so that's where 10K is. What I bring to this team, I can't provide. And so I have to step back. I have to, figure out what my next move is. Again, to be effective for the team. What does the team need? They need 10K and the role of the skills that he brought that was unique to him. And it was also something he really leaned into. So I think that when people can do that and just acknowledge that, like, where I'm at right now, it's not good for you. And so I don't need to be on this upward projection. I don't need to, those things don't matter. What matters is the team and is the mission. And it's not about me and my ego and needing to be the one who's leading this thing the whole time.
Yeah, no, that's the big one. And I think it's also cool that 10K has read and some other people to help him try to overcome those challenges. And he also is a team that's very supportive and understanding of that. And like I said, that just comes at, I guess, that psychological safety aspect of being in an environment where it's okay to admit those things and that people are still going to support you with them. Yeah, no, that was a big sort of thing. And it's funny too, because throughout the podcast, when we've talked about psychological and safety and things like that, that's something that I'm still getting a handle on, right? Like, so what I would just be like, oh yeah, create a good, safe working environment for your team and people like that. I never thought about that too much, and I think that was just because of you can only look through the lens that you have, and I've definitely, I guess, knowing now, there are times when I didn't feel psychologically safe in my work environment, but I just sort of accepted that, right? Like that's just the way things are. And so it's been a really big eye opener to be like that's not the way things are supposed to be, and that it's not that's not an okay standard to put onto other people and be like I'm okay with it, so you should be okay with it too. Um
Yeah.
and so that's been a big eye opener for me. That's broader than anything else, but that's
Yeah.
there's the fun facts from Corey. So yeah. What else?
Well, I
The
like
other thing,
the real quick. I like the fun facts from Corey, because I think that psychological safety, it looks so different in different environments, and it looks different to different people. I've definitely heard some people who say, well, my boss doesn't listen to me and doesn't take my feedback. I don't feel psychologically safe. Well, that's not psychological safety. Like psychological safety is something has come up or I see something on the horizon that is a problem. Do I feel like I can tell my boss about that problem without getting hammered or being humiliated? I've made a mistake. Can I say that I've made that mistake? Or am I going to get hammered, which is going to make me lie and try to hide it? Right. So it's really like in that realm. An extension of that, though, is this other piece of, are we building these relationships? Excuse me. Are we building this trust with the people around us so that they can do that? Do I understand that maybe Corey doesn't like to be called out in a group, or he feels called out if I ask him for his opinion in a group meeting? So I have a shared document instead where he can put his input. And therefore I'm creating this safety and this trust in the team so that then when these big things come up, is psychological safety present? So yeah, I think it's there's a lot of gray space with it, but I think when we really think about it in the workplace too, it's still psychological safety is still tied to a high level of accountability. Can I be accountable for my actions? And will this person actually be fair about how that accountability is carried out?
yeah, and again, like you had said already, I I was naive to all of those facts. So learning that like those things exist, and it's amazing because I look back and a psychologically safe workplace has not always been a thing, but it's always it you know what I mean? Like it's not always been a word on the mouth of people. And so then I try to look back and think about the leaders that I had that were making when I was like really happy in the work environment where I felt psychologically safe, the team felt psychologically safe. We didn't know that that was a word, or at least I didn't, and I'd never heard it mentioned before. Looking back on the things that they did to do that, I don't even know if they knew they were doing it. It was just subconsciously. That's they were good, honest, true leaders, and so they were able to do that. And I think that that might be, in my opinion, that's like when it works best, right? When you don't even have to think about it, you just do it, you know. So um, it doesn't even have to be part of the conversation because it's part of the culture.
Mhm.
And I think that that's pretty cool. So,
Like I
um,
was telling you the other day, I was struggling with something. I was just stuck on a project I was working on. And the first person I thought to call was my boss, just to be like, this is going nowhere. I did it.
yeah,
But I knew that I could say that to her and she wouldn't be like, what an idiot. Why did I hire you? Right. It wasn't like that at all. It was like, great, let's talk through this. What are these different pieces? Boom. And then I was, back off and I was doing fine. So
yeah,
yeah, I think that, yeah, I think she's somebody who creates really great psychological safety.
yeah. At least for you, because then she called me up and was like, "Oh, why did I hire this person?" I'm like, no, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Uh, she doesn't know who I am. But yeah. So the other big thing, like I said, is throughout this whole thing, you have George who's constantly going through like mini traumas, not on her own, but that are heavily impacting her. Of with like you said, all these explosions going off and all these attacks, she keeps losing friends, and I think for her, um, it, and I get she doesn't want she didn't like change, or like she wanted to get back to what she thought right was. And so she was there, and now things are going wrong. And I think about that when it's like, um, when working on a goal or something, for like when things are going well, it's like always waiting for that other shoe to drop, so to speak. But it's like things are things were going really well, and now there's all these failings and stuff that she thought she'd already done, or like that had been good. So it's like revisiting them. Um, so she thought the people that were people were people. She thought that, the things that were established and were good, and she thought everyone bought into that. And now that there's people sort of running counter to that don't like the idea, that are, creating these attacks and everything, I think that's like a really hard struggle for her. And you can tell, because it's a TV show, right? She's dealing with a lot of the internally, but with the team, she remains very true. So, not saying that you have to be a robot around people, but she understands that, like bringing those issues forward isn't going to help anybody, right? So it's just like, um, yeah, I think that's pretty interesting.
I think the transparency and vulnerability in leadership has its boundaries, and leaders need to understand those boundaries. This is going on. I don't know what the next steps are to take. What do you all think? That's great vulnerability, great transparency in leadership. Here are all my thoughts and feelings and how I feel hurt about this different stuff. Not appropriate. Not appropriate. Like, how does it help the situation? Is you saying something going to make other people more able to say something, right? Are you in fact being a little bit of a trailblazer there, maybe opening the door for more conversation? Or is it going to shut down the room? Because I've definitely been in situations where somebody says something that they feel is vulnerable, and you killed the conversation in the room, because what you did, it was an overshare, and it was not appropriate for the topic. It was not appropriate for the group. It just wasn't appropriate. So it wasn't transparent and vulnerable. It was weird and inappropriate.
Yeah.
And it's not that people need to be scared about those different things. You know what the right thing is to do at work. It's like when people are, I don't know what to say. You do know what to say. You know how to not make people uncomfortable. Watch their faces, watch their body language. Like, you can tell when people are nearing that. And if you do make a mistake, which people are human, of course they're going to, apologize, right? Oh, that wasn't the right thing to say in this environment. I apologize, right? Like, it doesn't have to be this big production, and you don't have to double down on it. But yeah, I think that George does a really good job of being as transparent and vulnerable as she can, but also like we're still moving forward. We still have to get to where we are now is not acceptable. We still have to get to somewhere else. So let's keep our heads in the game, because worrying about and admiring a problem isn't going to get us anywhere.
Admiring the problem. That is such a good point. Now, I don't think many do that in this show, right? On the team or anything like that, because they can't afford to do it.
Mm-hmm.
But boy, do I run into people admiring problems a lot. And that's something that I've always struggled with, trying to get people out of that mindset, or pushing them past that and saying, what's the solution? Because especially my work environment, the industry that I'm in, it's very appropriate, or people, I'm not saying it is appropriate, people view it as very appropriate to admire a problem, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's yeah, and that, I think that's a place where I struggle. That's also a place where I don't know, spicy take, I guess. Maybe I shouldn't say that out loud. That's also where I start to check out as like a leader, as a teammate. Like the moment that people are like, we're just gonna admire this, and we're looking at like, oh, this is a problem, and it's, whatever. I'm done. I don't want to play anymore. You know what I mean? Like, that is, and that's a struggle for me, because sometimes you can't afford to do that, right? One, you people got to pay bills, right? You need a job, so it's not like you can just stop doing it, because also, there's a little bit of resiliency there, right? So it's like, you, as a person, you want to maybe change that attitude. It just gets a little tiring, but it's like, put the energy into it. You don't want to quit too fast, like quit, like give up too quickly. So it's like that fine line to walk all the time. But it's, yeah, that's a big one for me. Some people are just, yep, that's an issue, but I'm still going to put 8 hours on my timesheet. We'll call it a day. Maybe we'll fix it next quarter. Fix it now.
I think also it's really interesting because I'm someone who, probably similar to you, has a bias to action. Like, oh, it's a problem. Like, let's figure out how to solve it. Now, with that, though, sometimes I will completely just go into problem solving, not having a fully fleshed out problem statement. Like, I get what we're trying to solve for. Right, here's this problem, but I don't always take the time, and I'm getting better at it slightly, to be like, no, this is the problem statement. This is the exact thing I'm solving for. So this is what success looks like, and this is what support looks like. But I've also seen, and I think this is why I have such a bias to action and just getting to problem solving, because people will take that, like, let's define the problem, and they will make that a 3 to 7 year process. When it's like, shit, what's the problem? Just tell me what the problem is. Maybe you could even tell me what you think the solution is, and I can backwards figure out what that problem is. But yeah, as soon as people are just sitting around, like, being so proud of the problem that they have, it's very, I'm the same way, where I will check out, like, because you're not interested in solving the problem. You like your problem. So
Yep.
Keep your problem. Like, I don't have the energy to try to figure out how to solve something that you're going to fight for when you love this problem.
Yeah, such a great point. Such a great point. Yeah, so those are kind of my big things, sort of from this episode, really. But I think the other thing is, it's a broader thing, but you also you have this change management piece that George is doing throughout all of this, from people going from being people to talkers.
Mhm.
And it's at a very, like, micro level, right? Because it's change, it's like mentorship and change management for individuals. So they're transitioning to this new group. And I just think that's, she does a great job of it. Obviously, she's very, like, compassionate and caring, but she's still um like, sections herself off as a leader, right? It's not like she's trying to be their friend. She's like, yep, this change is happening. It's okay. We're all still here for you. And I think she talks about it. She used that plural form a lot, I noticed, of like, we're here, we're gonna help you get through this. And then she kind of underpins that with, like, I will make sure that everyone is working together to get you through this. I'm paraphrasing, but I just thought that phrasing was, like, really great, right? It's like, here's what we as an organization are going to do for you. Here are the things that I am personally responsible for within that organization. She's not saying she's going to hold their hand. Bad example, but just saying, right? I will hold your hand through all this. She's saying, we will make sure you get through this process. I will make sure that people are in place to help you get through this process. And I think that's just I think she does a very good job. That's very well done.
Agreed. And so as we move into the next episode, so we've got this segregation essentially that's happening with the talkers and humans. And so they find this place called Limbo. And as they get to this place called Limbo, who runs it? Who else?
Yeah, Murphy. Yeah, and in fact,
the great Murphy.
yeah, my number one note on this was Murphy being Murphy, doing Murphy things with Limbo. That was my indicator. But one of my favorite things, the way I tried to view this, it's a little bit broad, but muse with me, if you will, please. Essentially, Murphy's a member of Bitemark, part of the team. That's the whole big thing. He left the Bitemark organization and he started his own organization of Limbo because he didn't always agree with everything that Bitemark was doing. What I think is so interesting, as we start to learn throughout this episode, all he is still doing Murphy things, right? It's filled with I don't know, stuff that'll probably get us content blocked. Nothing terrible, but it's like, there are games with,
right? It's an underground club.
Yeah, exactly. But he's like a decent human being. All of that stuff that he's done with Bitemark, all the compassion, all the caring, putting people first, right? Treating everyone the same. Those all kind of play through with this. And that's, what I think is so interesting is, um, and I don't know if it was in this podcast, you talked about like being an organization where good people are from, right? So like helping get people to that next step. I think that that's a great example of what that can look like, right? So
Yeah.
yeah, but that was one of my first big takeaways. What about you?
It was interesting to see how Murphy found his way and his form of leadership. Yeah, like you said, Murphy doing Murphy stuff in the most Murphy way possible. And then it's interesting too, because this is where we also have another character reconverge with the group, and that's Addie. And they're still trying to find Dante, and Addie says she knows where Dante is. But now we have this new interesting dynamic. So we have Murphy, who we see him, and he has really found his sweet spot of like, this is what he should be doing. He should be leading an underground club, right? But he's also providing sanctuary, safety
Yeah.
to these talkers, right? So there's that piece. And now we have Addie, who is, of course, she trusts Warren, right? Mentor, friend, all of that. But now she also understands a little more nuance, and her scope has widened in a way where she also has additional details that this group doesn't necessarily have. And she doesn't really know George. And so to lead them to where Dante is, or to this other place where there are potentially more people that are being put at risk. I think it was just really interesting to see Addie like standing on her own as not only an individual contributor, but also as a leader, essentially, to be like, it is also my responsibility to protect these people, even if I have to protect them from other people that I care about. So I thought that was really, it was just really interesting, because there was this internal battle of, if it had just been Warren, she probably would have been like, yes, all day. But instead, it was like, now there's this new person there, and I don't know this person or trust them. I understand that Warren does, but I think it also goes to this transitive trust isn't always there. Just because you trust somebody doesn't mean that I will, for whatever my reasons are. And so I think that that's something that we also have to like remember, like in leadership and in groups, where it's like sometimes somebody has access to information, not that they're trying to not share it, but they have access to information or experiences that are going to cause them to not just jump right in and seem to be on the same page. They have experiences that definitely tell them to be more cautious.
Yeah, great points. And one of the other things that really sort of, so with Addie coming back, and like you said, sort of being her own person, she's been away for a little while. Murphy starting the club, and then you have George. What I also think is interesting is you have three people, and I'm taking some poetic license, but it is a TV show, with George especially. But like you have three people who were mentored and learned leadership from Warren, right? Warren was their mentor, was their first leader, and all three of them have taken very sort of different paths. Um, but what I think is so interesting is the underpinnings, right? That moral compass that Warren instilled, right? Her viewpoints of right and wrong, or like how to do the business of like a zombie apocalypse, because all three of them have those sort of similar underpinnings. They can communicate very effectively with very limited words.
Mhm.
And I think that is so fascinating to me. And where like that idea of like we try to promote within, I think it gets lost in translation of why organizations try to do that. I think they often say it as it's great on a a fold out flyer, right? It's great from like a, well, people around because they think they're going to make more money, but I think they lose sight of like what the power of promoting within and keeping people within an organization that learn within the organization and moving them to leaders, what that does from a spoken and non-spoken sort of communication and working together effectively standpoint is. I don't know what your thoughts are on that.
I think that's a really great point, as far as like the impact of mentorship, right? People are going to find their own path and their own way forward with whatever you give them. They're going to use that in their own way. And so to see the three of them ultimately having this really great moral compass, but really going about it a different way, I really like that. I hadn't thought about that way. Just thinking.
I made you think, so I made a note of it. Date and time. But it's a rare one. Yeah. So that was my other big thing. With that, and then the other. But I will say, like you had talked about with the trust not being like that transfer because Warren trusts her, Addie should trust her. I think that's interesting, and I also think there's a moment where they're fighting with a zombie where there's this little bit of, we talked about Addie almost being like Warren's lieutenant, you know what I mean? Her vice president. And now George, what's weird is she's both filling that role, but also at the same time, it's almost as if Warren has become George's vice president, which now like not demotes, but like demotes Addie down to manager. You know what I mean? And so it's like because like when they're doing that fight and they're calling things out left, right, or whatever, there's almost like this show off. One for Warren's affection, two for what makes you better than me. There's just like this little bit of storming that happened, right? Little micro instance of storming that I may have read into it too much, but I just thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, I think I just didn't see it that way. Not that you're wrong. I
Yeah.
think you're doing great.
Thank you.
No, I think that, yeah, I guess that's just not how I viewed it. It was kind of just more this evolution of nobody needs to be subordinate to anybody else. We are all standing on our own for these different things, and we can support each other. That doesn't mean we need to be subordinate to one another.
Well, no, I think it was like, but they're like, because there's like, I don't know if it was in this episode or if I'm putting the cart before the horse, where Addie kind of had that, and if I'm talking outside of turn or out of order, I apologize, but like where Addie was like saying to George, "You will not turn my friend in," right? When like they were looking for like you're not going to turn him into Estes. We're not doing this, right? And George is obviously very clear about that, but I think Addie came with like a lot of aggression because she was trying to set those boundaries and that groundwork, and I thought that was that just stuck out to me as being very powerful, right? About, you talk about the tough conversations, or we talked about that a little before, and that was negotiation, and I thought that was handled really well.
Yeah,
So.
I think it's important in different things to, establish these boundaries. And with those boundaries, establish what's going to happen if those boundaries are violated. And I think that any good leader does that. And I think that because of the severity of the situation and because of who Addie is, she just comes at things very directly. And but I definitely appreciate that she's just like, this is what, like this is a no-go. So don't do that. And also, George and Addie don't know each other's history with Duncan and why he's important. So they haven't established enough of a relationship to have that discussion. Not that they have to.
No. And Dante, yeah, like I said, I always forget about Dante, but he's very key in all of this too, right? Because that's, nope, very good point. Very good point.
Thank you.